Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the latest on the NHL in terms of expansion. Yes, that's right. We're taking a look at the NHL as apparently the NHL, again, maybe not this season, maybe not next season, maybe not 3 years from now, but the NHL has been considering adding more teams to the National Hockey League. So this was an interesting report, and this was from NHL Trade Rumors. Now again, some people like them, hate them, whatever it is, but recently they posted an article saying that the NHL rumors lead to the league could expand past 32 teams soon. The NHL has the most teams in the league right now that they've ever had, 32 teams right now, than it has ever had in its history. But they may not be done quite yet, as it is possible that they look to expand. So if that's really under discussion, and the NHL is projected, the salary cap will go up another $1 million for next season, which means the NHL salary cap will be $83 million per team each season. That is great for the game. You know, the NHL has obviously been pushing to expand into non-traditional hockey markets, as that has been a theme, but there is some possibility of seeing a new team, you know, maybe in a traditional hockey market. Maybe the market that, yeah, they deserve a hockey team, because not necessarily because you're trying to grow the game, but to kind of show your roots and grow some rivalries in traditional hockey markets. And I'll get to that in a minute. But we obviously know the NHL's top two picks, if they were to add a team in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. I think the NHL has kind of put the sentiment that they want to keep teams. You know, I think it would be similar to what we saw here with Vegas and Seattle. Within a 5-year window, we could see whoever has the money first and everything set up first. We'll see one East and one West team come within 5 years of each other. I don't think we're going to see anything like we did in 2000, where we see, say, Columbus and Florida and like Minnesota. Like, you won't see 4 different teams have one expansion draft. It's just not going to happen. I don't think the NHL's owners would necessarily be too fond of that and agree to that. So I think you're looking at a situation where that is likely the case, right? You'll see, you know, in 2030, maybe even sooner than that, maybe even in 2027, we have, you know, a Western Conference team come in, and in 2031, 4 years later, we see another team come in to the Eastern Conference. Something like that, right? So here are my picks. So we're going to start off in the Western Conference. And I think the Western Conference, it depends on where the allegiance lies. There's a couple of different cities that they could kind of delve into here. So the first one is Houston. Now, this is a non-traditional hockey market, but there's nothing to say that the NHL hasn't explored this market before. You know, the problem with Houston is there's a lot of football. The state of Texas is known for their football, college football, NFL football. It would be a tough market to override those traditions, right? You know, football is the sport in Texas, and Dallas has found a way to, you know, the Dallas Stars have kind of tapped that market, but they have some of the lower numbers in the National Hockey League in terms of attendance. They're toward the bottom 10 consistently every year. Now, American Airlines Center is one of these smaller arenas, but still, even with that, they aren't filling that arena to capacity. So there is that level of concern about adding another team in the Lone Star State, is they don't necessarily generate a ton of attention. And there is a huge market in Houston. Houston is one of the bigger cities that's kind of been on the rise here. And the Houston Rockets owners, who own the NBA team, the Houston Rockets, their ownership has shown some genuine interest in bringing a sheet of ice in the National Hockey League down to Houston. Now, like I said, we've seen, you know, the Gordy, you know, the Hows wearing an Arrows jersey, the Houston Arrows. So there is some of that gravitas to the fact that a great like Gordie Howe has worn that jersey in the past. But other than that, it really hasn't developed beyond that, right? And that's kind of what I said. You've got the college football. You've got TCU, Baylor, SMU, Texas, Texas Tech. I mean, and that's just in college. And then you go to the NFL. You've got the Houston Texans, the Dallas Cowboys. Like, there is just so much going on down there. It is a tough market to tap into. So that's Houston. And that's in the Western Conference. And that's been the one a lot of people are saying if there's a new team, Houston is probably the next bid to get an NHL team. Portland. Now, Portland's kind of interesting because similar to Houston in the sense that they would have a clear rival in the Dallas Stars, Portland would be coming into a market that just had an expansion team, the Seattle Kraken. Seattle and Portland, there is going to be a huge rivalry there and kind of a three-way rivalry in Seattle, Vancouver, and Portland. Those three teams right there are in a very tight radius to each other and would definitely add a little bit of excitement to that northwestern, U.S.-Canadian border rivalry in that little area there. And there was a lot of hockey over there. They've got a World Junior WHL team in juniors over there in Seattle. They've got a team in Portland. I don't remember what their team name is, but they've got some hockey there. Tacoma's been a pretty big market right around that border as well. So there's a lot going on in terms of hockey growth in that area. I could totally see a team going to Portland. Now, here's another one similar to Houston where we've seen teams there in the past and it just hasn't really stuck. Now, there was huge rumors back in the mid-2010s that Kansas City could see an NHL franchise, a relocation of the New York Islanders going down to Kansas City. Now, obviously, those dreams have been far gone since the Islanders' brand new arena in UBS Arena kind of came to fruition. But, Kansas City's been thrown around there in the past. They have a building down there, Sprint Center, which I think it's been renamed. I think it's T-Mobile Center. So now we have T-Mobile Arena, T-Mobile Center, Scotiabank Arena, Scotiabank Saddledome, Rogers Center, Rogers Arena. Could we get any more complicated with the names? Like, why can't every company just have one building? Like, why don't we have a Taco Bell arena or a McDonald's arena? For Pete's sake. I mean, I'm asking for a friend here, but I don't understand that. But that's besides the point. T-Mobile Center, because that's what it's called. It's in the Midwest. So, again, you have some good natural rivalries there, right? You look at St. Louis. That would be a great rivalry there. Chicago. There's a couple of interesting things there that I think in the Western Conference side of things could make things pretty interesting. Milwaukee. Milwaukee's an interesting one. And, of course, my New York accent's going to come out with the way I say Milwaukee, but I'm going to say it that way. Milwaukee, okay? Accept it. The thing about Milwaukee that's interesting is, they are a passionate sports environment down there. The Green Bay Packers, right? They have a huge following and a huge fan base. The Milwaukee Admirals have been the Nashville Predators AHL affiliate for the last, 5 or 10 years. They've been there for a while. And they've got some pretty cool jerseys as well. They've got a pretty interesting hockey market as well. Ryan Suter, Joe Pavelski, some pretty big-name NHL players are from that Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. Another interesting thing is they're right in the mix of a three-way rivalry similar to the way that we just talked about with Portland, in the sense that Milwaukee is in between the state of hockey in Minnesota and Hockeytown, Detroit, Michigan. So again, you're creating three really good rivalries there. And what's interesting about Milwaukee, because of their location in between Minnesota and Detroit, depending on what division and conference they fall into, you could really create a good rivalry. And they're a team that is kind of like Detroit in the sense that, you could put them in the Western Conference, you could put them in the Eastern Conference. I think technically Milwaukee is Central Time Zone, so maybe they'd be better in the Western Conference. But I think that would be a really interesting sort of new rivalry to create with a team like the Minnesota Wild. And again, you talk about just a hockey market, there's definitely something to be said there. Now we're going to go to the Eastern Conference, and there is a lot of interesting teams in the East that could be mentioned here. So the first one that everybody talks about, obviously Houston is the top team to get a bid on the Western Conference. But on the Eastern Conference, Quebec City's name always comes out. Quebec City is a huge hockey market. They've had a hockey team in the past. Things obviously fell through with the Canadian dollar. That was a huge part of it. And I think that could be a huge part of the issue here today for an NHL franchise going to Canada. But it's always mentioned. And I think that a return of the Nordiques would be incredible. I am a huge fan of that idea. They've got a building, a huge, huge building there. And they were very close to a bid when Vegas came in. It came down to Quebec and Vegas. And they decided, non-traditional hockey market in the States, boom. And that's why they went to Vegas. And they were the pioneers, remember, at the time. That was before the Las Vegas Raiders came in. And the potential new Vegas Flamingos or whatever NBA team comes in, right? They were the pioneers of a professional team in Vegas, in the Sin City. So that was a big appeal at the time. But now, I would say there's an argument to whether it's Houston or Quebec for the next team. I think it's a pretty close divide there. But again, the problem going against Quebec is the population of Houston is way bigger, and the American dollars in a non-traditional hockey market. That is so appealing to the NHL. And that is something that is going to favor a Houston expansion over Quebec. But I do think Quebec is the top team. If there isn't, I would say even Milwaukee is ahead of Quebec. As frustrating and annoying as that is, the NHL is putting a large emphasis on teams in the States. But that's not to say there are exceptions. We've seen a team in a non-traditional hockey market like Atlanta, the Atlanta Thrashers, relocate to Winnipeg. So we have seen teams in the United States go to Quebec. That is on the table here. But I just think it is one of those things where if a Quebec team comes in, it likely won't be expansion. It will have to be a team like we've mentioned already. It would have to be a Florida Panthers or a Nashville Predators or most likely at this point an Arizona Coyotes relocating to Quebec. I think that's the only way we're going to see a Canadian team get favored over a U.S. team is something like that happening. And I think that's kind of where you have to look at. And you have to kind of say Quebec is a more attractive market than even Winnipeg, in my opinion. I think there's more money to be made in Quebec City than in Winnipeg. And they were able to move a team to Winnipeg in the past. So, again, right place, right time. But I think that's definitely on the table. If the NHL is looking to expand in the East, I think Quebec City is a great market. Now, there's a couple of other markets as well. The Hamilton area has been mentioned. Now, the problem with Hamilton, again, there's a very close proximity to Toronto, which might be a problem here. But that is something that we've seen in the past. They've had the Hamilton Bulldogs, who were an OHL team and an AHL team. They were the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, and Carey Price wore that Bulldogs jersey for a couple of years before making it to the big National Hockey League. So there is some genuine interest there. What else? Another one that I was thinking for the East, Halifax has been mentioned. Obviously, Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon are from Halifax, Nova Scotia. So there's always going to be that appeal there. And that's kind of an interesting market. You know, they've got the QMJHL Mooseheads. Travel is a concern there. You know, that is kind of a difficult thing. You know, their closest team is the Bruins. So maybe there would be a rivalry there. But I think Halifax would be an interesting team. And I think they just go with the Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia, whatever team name they want to do, right? The Nova Scotia Elks or whatever they end up becoming. I think there's some interest there. Now, you want to look at some kind of wildcard teams. I think, you look at an area like Cincinnati or Cleveland. Cincinnati has the Cyclones in the ECHL. Again, totally different market. It is a much smaller situation in the East Coast League, but they do have a team there. Cleveland has had the Cleveland Barons. They were an AHL team for a couple of years in the late 90s, early 2000s. So there's been something there. And again, you want to talk about creating rivalries. Cleveland and Cincinnati in the state of Ohio, there's a clear rivalry there, obviously in-state with Columbus and the Blue Jackets and trying to grow the brand of the Blue Jackets. That's obviously appealing. The Detroit Red Wings, you're right in the mix between, you're right in the middle of Detroit and Columbus. I think that's a great natural rivalry there. There's a lot that could be done in the Midwest. I think the NHL should really explore that, whether it's a Cincinnati or Cleveland or a Milwaukee or even Kansas City. Yeah, it's kind of towing on the line of the Midwest, but you get what I'm saying. I think there is a huge amount of money there to be had that the NHL kind of hasn't tapped into. So that's something to consider. Another one that's kind of interesting out west, San Francisco. Again, you're kind of picking for straws there, considering they already have so much AHL hockey there. They've already got the San Jose Sharks, which is really in the Bay Area already. So now you're just putting two teams in the Bay Area. Again, it's definitely possible. How many sports is there? 2 or 3 New York teams, right? It is feasible. The population's there. It just, is the NHL willing to do that? And then comes the question of, building out in California is kind of difficult. And if they want to build a completely new arena there in San Francisco, there is a lot of hurdles that we're seeing right now in places like even Arizona, in Calgary, in Ottawa. It is so difficult to build a building. The NHL is going to look to markets that already have something there, right? Like Quebec, they've got the Videotron Center. Like Kansas City, they've already got a building down there in Kansas City in T-Mobile Center. Houston, they could play where the NBA team is located, the Rockets. So, again, it comes down to a lot of different factors, and if you're missing one of those marks, which San Francisco is missing a complete building, they're going to be further down the line. And I just hate to say it, when you look at Cleveland, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, even Kansas City, there's so many other opportunities that the NHL is like, well, if we want to expand, we want to go to these 3 places before we go to Milwaukee or Cincinnati. And that's just the reality of the situation. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. If you had to pick one team in the East, one team in the West, where do you think is the most likely possibility of seeing expansion? I think Quebec City in the East and Houston in the West. Give us Houston in 2027. They got their expansion draft. And then in 2030, let's have a Quebec City Nordiques draft. I am so excited to see these two teams. I really hope this comes to fruition. Keep an eye out because, we remember when Vegas and Seattle came in, it was kind of quick. And we were like, oh, in 2020... in 2018, 5 years from now, Vegas is coming into the NHL. It seems like such a long time from now. And then all of a sudden, now Vegas is about to hit their 5-year anniversary in the National Hockey League, right? So we'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.